Hello everybody, my name is Felix Schönbrodt. I am the Managing Director of the LMU Open Science Center, and in this short video I want to give you a quick introduction into open science and what we at the LMU Open Science Center do. Researchers claim to have valid knowledge about the world, but why should we trust their claims? Let's contrast a researcher's claim to another group of people who also claim stuff. The famous snake oil salesman. This salesman uses a method which produces anecdotal evidence only and often false positive results in the desired direction. In contrast, a researcher uses a sound scientific method which, in the long run, arrives at an increasingly correct account of the world. The salesman hides his data and methods. Nobody can check or reconstruct what has been done. Researchers, in contrast, are transparent about the primary data, about their methods and analyses, and their claims are verifiable, in principle, by everyone. The salesman, of course, has commercial interests and a lot of conflicts of interest. Researchers have either no commercial interest, or if they have a conflict of interest, they should disclose them. To boil it down into one sentence, the snake oil salesman says, "Just believe me, trust me, I have the greatest snake oil which can cure a lot of diseases." Researchers, in contrast, do not rely on trust. Their motto is, for example, nullius in verba. This is the motto of the Royal Society, the world's oldest scientific society, and you can translate it into "don't trust my words." You don't need to trust the words because you can verify the claims. Now, this was a quite idealistic picture of the scientific enterprise. At least in our values, transparency and openness are deeply anchored. But what does it look like in practice? Well, of course, practice we have more problems. For example, the problem of publication bias, which means that null or negative results disappear from the literature. Here's one example from a meta-analysis of Turner and colleagues from 2008. They looked at the efficacy of antidepressants. And in the published literature, they found 51 trials published in journals, 48 of them positive, these are the white boxes here, and only 3 of them negative. If you look at that picture, the conclusion is very clear: these antidepressants clearly do work. However, these trials had to be pre-registered at the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. And at this administration, you also have to report the results after completion of the trial. And if you look at their registry, the picture looks a bit different. They only record 38 positive trials. Somehow 10 trials went from negative to positive upon the publication process. And there were not only 3 negative trials, but 36 negative trials. If you look at this picture, the conclusion would not be so clear anymore. A second problem: researchers are humans and humans do make mistakes. Honest mistakes. So this is not cheating, this is an honest mistake. And we already have some estimates how often we make mistakes in our analyses. This is one example from a journal in political science. And they require reproducible analysis code and open data at the submission. And they do an in-house checking during the review process, which means they run the script, look what numbers are produced in the analysis, and compare them to the manuscript. And of course, they should match. Now you maybe can think for a few seconds, what do you think, how many of these submissions had errors? And you should be aware that these authors knew that the code and the manuscripts will be checked by people at the journal. The answer is more than the half of the submissions had results in the paper that did not match the computed results from the code. The errors had a varying severity. Some were inconsequential, just minor rounding errors. Nothing bad, but also bad errors like wrong signs. That means the effect goes in the opposite direction as has been claimed, wrong labeling of regression coefficients, and so on. A third question concerning the credibility of science is about their replicability. If you repeat an experiment, then you should generally get the same result again. This is one of the pillars of the scientific method. Recent large-scale replication projects, however, have cast some doubt on the robustness of the published literature. One of the largest replication projects has been done in psychology. Many teams around the world tried to replicate 100 published studies, and they found that about 2/3 of them could not be replicated. Other projects, for example, social science, had some better results. Here's one from economy, another one from economy. Here are two famous experiments, or a series of experiments in cancer research, which had really bad results. 89%, respectively 79%, could not be replicated. There's one silver lining, which comes from experimental philosophy. They could replicate 78% of the experiments they looked at, which is roughly as good as you can get. So we could discuss limitations of any of these projects. As any other research, these projects do have their limitations, but the overall picture is not very assuring. We at the Open Science Center are convinced that transparency is one necessary part for tackling these pervasive problems in science. We think that a credible science rests on being an open science. But what is open science? There's no agreed upon single definition, but these are main pillars of open science. Open access, which means that the end product of the scientific process, the publication, is openly available to everyone. This can also include open peer review. So during the peer review process, peers give a review of the manuscripts, and they could be open for readers. It includes open source software, because only then everybody can reproduce the results. And this also includes reproducible analytical pipelines. That means you produce or provide a script where all analyses are reproducibly written down. It also includes open data, the raw data, which your claims are based on, and also open material, which is all material that is necessary for somebody else to replicate your study. This can also include open hardware. There are groups around the world who try to build their instruments based on open hardware. And finally, open educational resources are an important ingredient of open science. So how does open science help? We had the example of publication bias, and openness means that we need transparency about all study results, not just those that worked. With the example of honest errors, we need the raw data and the analysis scripts to be able to verify and check the published results, and also to be able to correct them if necessary. And we talked about independent replications. We need open material to be able to run these replication studies. If the methods are hidden and in secret, it's not possible to make an independent replication. But that's not all. Open science has also more benefits. First, we think it increases the trust in science, and we don't waste public resources. If you do have a great data set, certainly more research questions can be answered with that data set than your personal research question. You also can get constructive feedback. That means your research gets better before it gets published. Third, being open means to be more international and more inclusive. If you provide open material, like open software or open questionnaires, then researchers from poorer countries can be helped to do their research with less money. And finally, and maybe that's one of the most important points, openness increases the speed of discovery. In the current corona crisis, for example, the OECD says open science is critical to combating COVID-19. And the early successes, for example, for creating the diagnostic sets for COVID was only possible because the genome sequence of the virus was very early released in an open manner. Now let's introduce the LMU Open Science Center. We have 10 institutional members. All of them are from the LMU or affiliated with the LMU, and we have at the moment 54 individual members from 15 different disciplines. And I do not introduce every single member, but here you can see them. What is our mission? Our mission is that we want to promote and to foster open science practices at the LMU Munich, but also beyond. And this mission rests on 3 pillars. First, we want to provide advanced training and consultation in open science. This includes a modular course material and a toolbox available on our website. We give talks and we invite experts to give talks, and we provide an expert database, and we provide train-the-trainer workshops where we want to train people who want to teach open science themselves to, for example, graduate students. Second, we do meta-research. Meta-research is interdisciplinary research about research. For example, about publication bias, about the academic incentive system, about questionable analytical practices or methodological solutions to them. Being open and transparent can mean to do more work, and it makes you more vulnerable than when you do your research in a secretive way. For this reason, we aim to change the incentive structure as well, in a way that good scientific practice gets rewarded. This includes impulses and recommendations, which we develop, for example, for job descriptions of professorship positions or changes in PhD agreements and examination regulations. I will give an example for all of the 3 pillars now. Here's a screenshot of our website where we provide a toolbox. So the toolbox contains workshop material, including slides, exercises, and more on different topics. For example, open science introduction, pre-registration, power analysis, open data and open materials, and open access. All of this material is under a free license, a CC BY license, which means you can reuse it for your own teaching. We also started to provide videos. For example, here's a video of an open access workshop, options, requirements, and funding possibilities. Here's one example how we try to incorporate open science into the training of PhD students. At the Department of Psychology at the LMU, we now have a mandatory dissertation agreement, where at the beginning of the dissertation and at the end, both the supervisor and the PhD student think about open science practices, and at the end they disclose what kind of open science practice they did in the dissertation. So for example, did they provide open data? And they can say yes, here's the link, or say no and give some explanation, for example, why it was not possible. The second pillar, meta-research, here's one example from a collaboration from members of the Open Science Center from medicine, biostatistics, psychology, economy, and geography. And we realized that some solutions about the problem of multiplicity of analysis strategies have been rediscovered in different disciplines, all of them under different names. They are called multiverse analysis, sensitivity analysis, vibration of effects, and more of them. And all of them have the same core idea. And in this paper, we bring them all together and try to unify them. And finally, here's one example how we try to change the incentive structures. In 2015, we announced the first professorship position with an open science disclaimer and statement, which says that the Department of Psychology aims for transparent and reproducible research, including open data, open materials, and pre-registrations. Applicants are asked to illustrate how they have pursued these goals in the past and/or how they plan to do so in the future. We added this statement to 4 more professorship job descriptions and now have an official hiring policy where we say that we will always include this statement when we announce a new professorship position. When you go to our website, you can look at the events, which we do, talks, workshops, and more. At the moment, they are online. Usually we do them face-to-face also. And if you want to stay in the loop and get informed about activities of the Open Science Center, you can either follow us on Twitter, you can enroll into our mailing list. There's also another mailing list which is broader about Munich researchers for open and credible science. And if you are a member of the LMU, you can think about joining the Open Science Center. You can go to this website where you can see who can join and what you have to do for that. Thank you very much for your attention.